Can Burkina Faso be independent from Western hegemony? What happens when a nation, born from the ashes of colonial rule, is forced to defend itself against threats that trace its roots back to the very powers that once claimed to civilize it? Burkina Faso is facing such a reality today, as it battles an insurgency fueled by a history of Western interference and exploitation.
Burkina Faso is a free and independent country. It can choose to cooperate with whoever it wants to.
Captain Ibrahim Traoré, leader of Burkina Faso's military junta, is expanding his forces to confront the ongoing insurgency that plagues his nation. In a move that has garnered praise, his government is recruiting volunteer defense forces (VDP), widows and orphans of fallen soldiers to join the fight. But this decision is more than a military strategy. It's a response to a crisis that has been decades, if not centuries, in the making, a crisis that owes much to the legacy of Western powers. But how did Burkina Faso end up here? Let's find out. Burkina Faso's journey from colonization to independence was marked by a fierce struggle against Western domination. The country, then known as Upper Volta, was part of France's extensive colonial empire in West Africa. The colonial administration imposed French cultural, economic, and political systems on the local population, disregarding existing social structures and exploiting the region's resources for the benefit of the metropole. When the French finally relinquished control in 1960, the newly formed nation was left to navigate the treacherous waters of self-governance, burdened with the artificial borders and ethnic divisions imposed by colonial rule. These borders, drawn with little regard for the ethnic and cultural realities on the ground, planted the seeds of future conflicts. The promise of independence quickly gave way to internal strife, as political instability, economic challenges, and external pressures took their toll. The West's fingerprints were all over these challenges. France, the former colonial power, maintained a tight grip on its former colony's economy and politics, ensuring that true independence was more of a dream than a reality. Through mechanisms like the CFA franc, a currency directly linked to the French treasury, France continued to exert economic control over its former colonies. This system, which some critics have called neo-colonialism, ensured that Burkina Faso and other former French colonies remained dependent on their former colonial masters for economic stability. Meanwhile, the Cold War saw Western powers, particularly the United States and France, playing out their geopolitical games in Africa, often at the expense of the continent's nascent democracies. In Burkina Faso, this manifested in a series of coups and counter-coups, as different factions vied for power with the tacit or explicit support of external actors. The assassination of Thomas Sankara in 1987, a charismatic leader who sought to break free from Western influence and forge a truly independent path for Burkina Faso, was a turning point in the country's history. Sankara's death, widely believed to have taken place with the involvement of foreign powers, marked the end of his revolutionary government and the beginning of a period of political stagnation. But the real damage came in the form of economic exploitation. Burkina Faso, like many African nations, was integrated into a global economy designed to serve Western interests. Its resources, particularly gold, were extracted and exported, while its people were left to deal with the consequences. The structural adjustment programs imposed by Western-dominated financial institutions in the 1980s only worsened the situation, stripping the government of its ability to invest in social services and infrastructure. These programs, enforced by the International Monetary Fund (IMF) and the World Bank, demanded austerity measures that resulted in cuts to education, healthcare, and social welfare programs, exacerbating poverty and inequality. Fast forward to the 21st century, and Burkina Faso is still grappling with the effects of this legacy. The insurgency that now threatens the country is a direct result of the power vacuums and economic disparities created by Western interference. The jihadist groups operating in the Sahel region have thrived in this environment, exploiting the weaknesses left by years of Western exploitation and neglect. These groups, often armed with weapons supplied through Western channels or looted from Western-backed regimes in neighboring countries, have capitalized on the discontent among Burkina Faso's marginalized populations, offering them a sense of purpose and belonging that their government has struggled to provide. In all this, what role does the West play in perpetuating the conflict in Burkina Faso? The West's involvement in Burkina Faso didn't end with the formal end of colonialism. It has taken on new and more insidious forms. While the days of direct colonial rule are over, Western powers have continued to exert influence through military interventions, economic policies, and political pressure. This influence is often masked as aid or partnership, but the underlying dynamics of power and control remain the same. One of the most glaring examples of this is the so-called War on Terror, which has seen Western nations, particularly the United States and France, engage in military operations across the Sahel region. These interventions, often justified as efforts to combat terrorism, have only served to destabilize the region further. In Burkina Faso, the presence of Western military forces has not only failed to bring peace, but has also fueled anti-Western sentiment and driven recruitment for jihadist groups. The establishment of military bases, drone operations, and special forces missions in the Sahel have created a militarized environment that exacerbates existing tensions. These operations, often conducted with little regard for the local context, have resulted in civilian casualties, displacement, and the destruction of livelihoods. The heavy-handed approach of Western militaries, which prioritizes short-term tactical victories over long-term stability, has contributed to a cycle of violence that has proven difficult to break. The economic front is no better. Western-dominated financial institutions continue to impose policies that prioritize debt repayment and foreign investment over the needs of the local population. The conditionalities attached to loans and aid packages often require Burkina Faso to adopt neoliberal policies that benefit foreign investors at the expense of the local economy. This has left Burkina Faso's government with few resources to address the underlying causes of the insurgency, such as poverty, unemployment, and lack of access to education and healthcare. Moreover, Western governments and corporations remain deeply involved in the extraction of Burkina Faso's natural resources, particularly gold. The profits from this exploitation flow out of the country, leaving behind environmental degradation and social unrest. The mining industry in Burkina Faso, dominated by foreign companies, has been a source of tension and conflict. Local communities, often displaced from their land to make way for mining operations, receive little to no benefit from the wealth extracted from their soil. The environmental impact of these operations, including water contamination and deforestation, further exacerbates the economic and social challenges faced by these communities. It is within this context that Captain Traoré's junta operates, trying to navigate a complex web of domestic and international pressures while fighting a war that has been exacerbated by the very powers that now claim to offer support. The West, while publicly condemning the insurgency and offering military assistance, continues to pursue policies that undermine Burkina Faso's sovereignty and stability. The contradictions in Western policy, supporting authoritarian regimes when it suits their interests while preaching democracy and human rights, are not lost on the people of Burkina Faso. Given this ongoing interference, one might wonder how Burkina Faso can chart a path to true independence and stability. This leads us to our next question. What strategies are available to Traoré's government in its fight for survival? Faced with an existential threat from insurgents and the ongoing legacy of Western exploitation, Captain Ibrahim Traoré has made the controversial decision to expand his military forces by recruiting widows, orphans, and former members of the Volunteer Defense Forces (VDP). This strategy, while unconventional, reflects the harsh realities on the ground in Burkina Faso. It is a response born out of necessity, not choice, and highlights the difficult decisions that leaders in the global South often have to make when faced with crises that have roots far beyond their borders. The recruitment of widows and orphans is not just a desperate measure. It is a strategic decision rooted in the understanding that the fight for Burkina Faso's future cannot be won by conventional means alone. These recruits bring with them a deep personal connection to the conflict, having lost loved ones to the very forces they now fight. This gives them a unique motivation and resolve that cannot be easily replicated by professional soldiers. In a conflict where morale and the will to fight are often as important as military tactics, the emotional and psychological strength of these recruits is a significant asset. Moreover, Traoré's decision to prioritize former VDP members ensures that the newly expanded forces will include individuals with experience in guerrilla warfare and local knowledge of the terrain. These are critical assets in a conflict where conventional military tactics have often failed to yield results. The VDP, originally formed as a community-based militia to protect local villages from jihadist attacks, has a deep understanding of the local context. Their experience in asymmetrical warfare, coupled with their intimate knowledge of the local geography, makes them invaluable in the fight against insurgents who often use the terrain to their advantage. But Traoré's strategy also speaks to a broader understanding of the need for national unity. By recruiting from among the families of fallen soldiers, the junta is reinforcing the idea that the fight against insurgency is not just a military campaign, but a collective struggle for the survival of the nation. This approach is designed to foster a sense of shared purpose and resilience among the population, even as the country faces immense challenges. In a nation as diverse as Burkina Faso, with its many ethnic and linguistic groups, fostering a sense of national unity is crucial. Traoré's recruitment strategy, by involving those who have been most directly affected by the conflict, aims to build a sense of collective ownership over the country's future. Yet, even with these strategies, the question remains: can Burkina Faso truly achieve stability and security in the face of such overwhelming odds? The path to stability and security for Burkina Faso is fraught with challenges, both internal and external. Internally, the country must address the root causes of the insurgency, including poverty, unemployment, and the lack of access to basic services. This requires a government that is not only strong militarily, but also capable of delivering on its promises of economic development and social justice. Traoré's government will need to undertake significant reforms to address these challenges, even as it fights a war on multiple fronts. One of the most pressing internal challenges is the economic situation. Burkina Faso's economy remains heavily dependent on agriculture and mining, with the latter dominated by foreign corporations. To achieve long-term stability, the government will need to diversify the economy, reduce its dependence on volatile global markets, and invest in sectors that can provide sustainable jobs for its population. This will require a shift away from the extractive industries that have long defined Burkina Faso's relationship with the global economy and towards sectors like manufacturing, technology, and services that can provide more stable and inclusive growth. In addition to economic reforms, the government will need to address the social and political divisions that have been exacerbated by the conflict. Burkina Faso is home to a diverse population, with over 60 ethnic groups and multiple religious communities. Ensuring that all these groups feel represented and included in the national project will be critical to achieving long-term peace and stability. This will require not only political reforms, but also efforts to promote dialogue and reconciliation at the community level. Externally, Burkina Faso must navigate a complex geopolitical landscape where Western interests often conflict with the needs of the local population. The influence of foreign powers, particularly France and the United States, remains a double-edged sword. While their military and financial support can provide short-term relief, it often comes with strings attached that undermine the country's long-term sovereignty. The challenge for Traoré's government will be to manage these relationships in a way that maximizes the benefits for Burkina Faso, while minimizing the negative impacts of foreign interference. To achieve true stability, Burkina Faso will need to forge a new path that prioritizes self-reliance and regional cooperation over dependence on Western powers. This means building stronger ties with neighboring African nations and regional organizations, such as the African Union and ECOWAS, to develop a coordinated approach to security and development. Regional cooperation will be particularly important in addressing the transnational nature of the jihadist threat, which spans multiple countries in the Sahel region. By working together, Burkina Faso and its neighbors can share intelligence, coordinate military operations, and address the underlying socio-economic factors that fuel extremism. It also means reducing reliance on foreign aid and investment by fostering domestic industries and promoting sustainable development. This will require significant investments in education, infrastructure, and technology, as well as efforts to improve governance and reduce corruption. By building a more self-reliant economy, Burkina Faso can reduce its vulnerability to external shocks and increase its ability to chart its course in the world. But perhaps most importantly, Burkina Faso's future depends on its ability to heal the divisions within its society. The recruitment of widows and orphans into the military is a powerful symbol of national unity, but it must be accompanied by broader efforts to reconcile the various ethnic and religious groups that make up the country. This will require a government that is not only strong in the face of external threats, but also committed to building a more inclusive and equitable society. The process of reconciliation will be long and difficult, but it is essential for the country's long-term stability. This will involve not only addressing the grievances of those who have been marginalized or affected by the conflict, but also creating opportunities for all Burkinabe to participate in the nation's political, economic, and social life. Only by building an inclusive society, just and fair, can Burkina Faso hope to overcome the challenges it faces and build a brighter future for its people. As we look to the future, one final question remains. What lessons can be learned from Burkina Faso's struggle that can be applied more broadly to the fight for African sovereignty? Burkina Faso's struggle is not unique. It is part of a larger pattern that has played out across the African continent for decades. The challenges faced by Captain Traoré's government are reflective of the broader struggle for African sovereignty in the face of ongoing Western interference. This struggle is characterized by a complex interplay of military, economic, and political factors, all of which have their roots in the colonial era. One of the key lessons from Burkina Faso's experience is the importance of self-reliance. African nations cannot afford to depend on Western powers for their security and development. Instead, they must invest in their people and institutions, building the capacity to address their challenges without external interference. This requires a shift away from the model of development imposed by Western-dominated financial institutions, which prioritizes foreign investment and debt repayment over the needs of the local population. The importance of self-reliance extends beyond economic policy. It also applies to the way African nations approach security and governance. The reliance on foreign military assistance, whether from former colonial powers or new global players, often comes with significant risks. These include the loss of sovereignty, the erosion of trust between the government and its people, and the potential for foreign powers to prioritize their interests over the needs of the local population. By building strong, independent security forces and governance structures, African nations can reduce their vulnerability to external manipulation and increase their ability to address their challenges. Another important lesson is the need for regional cooperation. No African nation can achieve true sovereignty in isolation. The threats faced by Burkina Faso, from insurgencies to economic exploitation, are transnational and require a coordinated response. By working together, African nations can develop their solutions to these challenges, reducing their dependence on Western powers and building a more secure and prosperous future for the continent. Finally, Burkina Faso's struggle highlights the importance of leadership that is both strong and compassionate. Captain Traoré's decision to recruit widows and orphans into the military is a powerful statement of the country's determination to survive and thrive in the face of adversity. But it also underscores the need for a leadership that is willing to make tough decisions in the interest of the nation, while also prioritizing the well-being of its most vulnerable citizens. Leadership in this context means more than just making strategic decisions. It means being attuned to the needs and aspirations of the population. It means building trust between the government and the people, and ensuring that the actions taken by the government are seen as legitimate and in the best interests of the nation. In the long run, the success of Burkina Faso's struggle will depend on the ability of its leaders to inspire and mobilize the population, while also addressing the structural issues that have fueled the conflict. Do you think Traoré is making the right choices? How will they turn out? What are your predictions about Burkina Faso's future? Let us know in the comment section. Will Burkina Faso without any Western nation's aid become strong? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.